more ado, I'd like to introduce you to Chris Dixon from the University of Lancaster. Chris is Head of IT Partnership and Innovation, which is a catch-all, he told me, for when they didn't really know what he was doing, they called it innovation. So Chris, thank you for coming and for innovating with us. And Chris is going to talk about exploring the strategic drivers behind Lancaster University's Ask LU campus chat. That flows off the tongue.
Excellent. I can't remember whether I came up with that title or whether perhaps Tab came up with it. So.
Anyway, you're very welcome and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really lovely to be here, and I didn't mention to any of the colleagues that I've met already, but I actually got my Sicilian Guilds in Electronic Engineering at Bolton College, so in some senses I'm a former alumni come good, perhaps. I don't know. No. Here we go. So I come to you having released a campus chatbot. I run an innovation team at Lancaster made up of staff. We've got 3 full-time developers, got a whole bunch of part-time students, and in many ways they did give me the job because no one really knew what innovation meant, and I'm kind of the crazy person that breaks the rules and gets away with things. And I've worked at the university since 2001, so I had a bit of experience doing programming and development. I then ran the help desk for a while, which was extremely interesting and challenging. And then, with a bit of a background as being a developer, I got into the idea of doing innovation. And one of the things about doing innovation is you have to do what we call horizon scanning. So you have to look at the next technology that might be coming along. And really, I always describe innovation as doing things that might go horribly wrong and don't necessarily have a business case. And in fact, that's how we sort of started with voice. But as was introduced, I should be telling you about what the strategic benefit was to the university. So for me, there's one clear reason that we should be doing voice technology, and the reason that we got into it, and that's that we can talk a lot more effectively than we can type. So I don't know, just by show of hands, who has a sort of voice assistant type device, an Amazon Alexa, a Google Home, an Apple HomePod? So that's quite a few, certainly the majority in the room. So you may recall many years ago the horror stories you would have of trying to talk to your device in your car or your Siri interface or your phone. It would never get it right, and it would always, present some weird answer. But actually the technology's kind of got to the point where it really is able to understand what you want. It's able to interface with things in your house. It can turn the lights on and off. It can do all of this fantastic stuff. Just another few stats. If you're interested in the world of voice stats, you can just Google, voice stats, and it'll give you a whole load. But I've pulled out a few here, which I think were quite key to us. So this is Gartner stats. 30% of all searches will be done without a screen by 2020. And we could see from our own kind of analysis that students are starting to use their voice more. They're definitely on their phones a whole lot. The idea of having a kind of big clunky web portal is definitely kind of out of the window. This was an interesting one. This is from Google. 41% of people who own a smart speaker say it feels like they're talking to a friend or another person. And when we started thinking about the idea of a digital friend, we thought that that was a really good thing for students. Sometimes they're in an environment where they might not have many friends. The idea of having a digital assistant that they can talk to in a similar way that they could talk to their friend at campus was quite appealing, really. Voice search is also coming into all of our devices. So Microsoft has Cortana, which is their search assistant, and they say that 25% of searches conducted through Windows 10 are kind of coming through Cortana. So it's starting to be built into devices. It's in your phone, it's in your desktop computer, it's everywhere. And here's another compelling stat. 55% of teenagers using voice search on a kind of daily basis. And those teenagers are the kind of people that are going to be coming to Lancaster University after they've finish their studies, hopefully. So we thought we'd better be getting on with delivering some chatbot. We also had a look at some really good, these are my favourite examples. So there's a brilliant Alexa skill by Domino's Pizza, and they realised that Domino's know your favourite pizza, they know your credit card number, and the Alexa device knows where you live. The genius was, all you have to say is, Alexa, ask Domino's to bring me my favourite pizza. Ding ding, knock on the door, and there's your pizza delivered. Super simple. Dead cheap for Domino's to deliver, didn't cost them a lot to program, but yet they took 5% of the worldwide market share in pizza delivery after the delivery of that app. So that's a pretty compelling story. And we were looking at that thinking, we better get on board with this. Campbell's Soup is another interesting one that I really like. Their little idea was that quite often you've got a whole cupboard full of ingredients and you want to know what you can make. So their app, you can say, I want to make some soup, and you can tell it the ingredients that you've got and it will suggest a healthy, nutritious soup recipe. Now, of course, it's going to require a kind of Campbell's Soup. So as long as you're stocked up on soup, then you're all right. So we had a whole bunch of, this last example, slightly frivolous perhaps, but this was my niece, who I think was 5 at the time. She had added some interesting items, which you might be able to read on the screen, to her parents' shopping list when they pulled it up on their Alexa device. And that just shows you that even the smallest kind of toddler is able to interact with this technology. So we had loads of compelling examples that we were seeing. It should, in theory, remember it's easier to talk than it is to type, it should be faster and easier. It can save you actual kind of real money, so from a university perspective that's a great kind of business case. We knew that students, even 5-year-old kids, were comfortable with using voice. Loads of compelling statistics, some of which I've shared with you today. And the other thing, because a lot of this technology is delivered in the cloud, because that's the computing power that actually drives your voice technology, it could build the university a kind of foundation for then delivering other cloud services. So we thought this is a really good idea, let's develop a campus voice bot. But of course, not quite as simple, you've got to get people to kind of invest in your idea. So one of the things we did is to cut a long story short, we became involved with Amazon. We demonstrated some of the innovation stuff we've been doing, and they said, how about we work with you to turn this into something really, really good. Amazon have a thing called start with the press release. I don't need you to read all this, but you basically start with your press release and then work backwards. So we wrote this really compelling story which went, Lancaster University is first UK campus to launch student digital friend. It knows everything about you and it's super amazing. And that was kind of where we started. We launched our campus chatbot back in March 19, and we've been continuing to build on it. But what was really interesting is that we actually had an in-print article in the Times newspaper, and I did a kind of check on what got written in the article versus what we wrote in our original press release, and it was pretty much the same thing. So I think that's that felt pretty good. So how did we actually do it, and how could you go about doing it too, if I've made the case to you? So our chatbot is called LU, because LU is kind of slang for Lancaster University. In fact, one of the most difficult things in the project was coming up with a name for the chatbot. Don't try and name anything in a university, I don't know if it's the same in a college, but the number of meetings we had trying to decide what to call it, absolute nightmare. Anyway, it's called LU and it's been very successful. So we started back in March 2018. We started off by, as I've hopefully shown you, having some early prototypes, playing around with things. That's how you do innovation, you mess about. Generating some excitement from the university community, showing it to people, getting them interested. We wrote that press release and we went to the university and said, can you give us a little bit of investment? And they said, yeah. Well, after 6 months, they said yeah, and they gave us some money to employ some developers to do it. We've got a team of student developers, which is really great. They're fairly cheap, but they also get really good experience kind of working and developing with us, which is really good. First thing we did, we thought, well, what we're going to build into this chatbot. So we had a simple one survey question to 3,000 students promoted through our mobile app. And we just said, what would you like to ask a chatbot? Open-ended question, and analyse the results, which were interesting. A lot of kind of when's the pub open, when's the shop open, all that kind of stuff, which we themed into something called Campus Life. But also a lot of academic things. So what feedback did I get? What's my grade? Do I need to work harder and push a bit harder to get a 2-1? Those kind of questions. So we kind of We themed those together, we clumped them into work areas, and then we went through a series of agile sprints. So if you're not developing software using agile, you definitely should be. It's the way forward. Sure, Aftab does the same. So we had a series of 30-day sprints. So we started off by building the sort of basic infrastructure in the cloud. So spinning up the resources in the cloud, making sure that it was secure. One of the things you need from a chatbot to be really useful is to know who the student is, so they can ask questions like, how am I doing? What's my grade? Where am I going next? Those kind of things. So we built all of that in. And then we started delivering features. So we started off with the easy questions that we knew were popular for students. So things like, where's my next event? When's my next deadline? We also tried to build in a sense of personality. So we had this idea that it could be the student's friend. So we were quite careful that when the chatbot speaks back, it uses sort of friendly language. There was lots of discussions as to how far we could go with that. You know, can we have the chatbot being sarcastic and making jokes? And that didn't go down too well. So there's a fine line there, but we started building greetings. There's a lot of sort of general question and answers that students have, but one of the things we try to do is always build on authoritative data so that we didn't have to separately maintain it. So we didn't want to be maintaining a huge database of question and answers, and we just wanted students to be able to get the information that we already kind of have. Crikey, not long 20 minutes, is it? We started building we realised early on that some of the things we were building for students would also be beneficial for staff without hardly any extra coding, so we started to build that in. We linked to loads of information we had on our campus. You can ask the bot about the availability of computer facilities, you can ask it whether your washer or dryer in the laundry is free, you can ask it which books you've got out into the library. Also, we integrated it into our mobile phone app as well as the voice devices, and subsequently we've integrated it into a bunch of endpoints as well. So that was it. A little bit of testing, always a good idea. And after 120 days total development time, we launched the skill, we wrote the press release, we had pictures, and it was hopefully successful. And there it was, Ask LU. Student involvement, absolutely key to what we do. We had over 100 beta users using devices, giving us feedback every time we made a new release. We also had student focus groups. We had representatives from the student union to make sure that students were happy with what we were doing. And we also used student social media platforms both to market the skill, but also as we were building it to kind of gain ideas and things as well. So the key really for involving students is a multi kind of mode approach, lots of different ways. So I was going to bring a device and I didn't, but I thought we might like to actually try and just ask the skill a couple of questions. So I'm going to fire up the Alexa app on my phone, and hopefully by holding it near my microphone it may actually work. Open LU.
Welcome back LU, Brian. I can tell you, for example, about what your next class is, who's teaching it, or how many library computers are free. What would you like to know?
How many computers are free in the library?
Sure, there are 75 computers free. What else can I help you with?
What time is Greg's open on Friday?
Greg's is open on Friday between 7 AM and 5 PM. What else can I help you with?
Can you book me a library group work pod on Friday for 1 hour?
You have a .S100.
Oh.
What can I help you with next?
That's it, thank you. Bye-bye. So just a few examples. It's obviously a live demo, so you can't expect it all to work. It works inside our mobile phone app, which is really great because we have a whole bunch of students using it. 98% plus of students were using the mobile app already. Works on the Alexa smart speaker. We've since embedded it into Microsoft Teams. We've embedded it into our student web portal, and it's now available as of this week as a phone number that you can actually ring up and talk to. So embedded across a whole bunch of different devices. Am I in for time? Timekeeper man.
2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. I'll skip my video. It's really useful for new students. New students told us they wanted information that they were embarrassed to ask about. We thought they'd come to our services, they don't want to do that. Simple things, what college am I in, what's my student ID, what's my email address, where am I next? It's really, really great for that. For existing students that also know the campus, they wanted different information. What's my average grade, how big is the diffusion, which you've seen. Even fancy transactions like booking a group work pod. It will collect all the information from you, it will make the booking, it will email you. One of the other groups we wanted to have help for was disabled students, and actually we worked with a girl that was blind, and she talked really powerfully, and we have some videos on this which I can share with you, about how amazing it was to her to have someone authoritatively speak the answer to her, and how that had been quite transformative. But we also built in some skills specifically for students with a disability. So I'll just finish by discussing what we see as the future. So since launch, let's just go back, my slides got a bit messed up. We've integrated since March, recorded and summarised lecturer feedback. So when the student asks for their grade, if the lecturer has recorded some feedback, they'll get the lecturer's voice, and if not, they'll get it read out. We've built it into our lecture playback and recording system, so you can ask to watch your last lecture. If you've got a video device, you get video. You can also search that, so you can say, tell me when my tutor mentioned quantum mechanics, and it will zoom you to that bit. We've still got resource to develop it. We're starting to look at using machine learning to be able to suggest things to the students. Perhaps you might want to read this journal, for example. We're looking at some quite tricky examples around welfare. So what if a student is really struggling and they want to say, you know, can you help me with that? Being able to do that in a way that works and perhaps has a human in the loop as well. We're building into a whole bunch of endpoints. That's one of our strategies to kind of get it as deployed to as many places as possible. We're building in more digital services for staff. The room booking example, staff were like, give us it immediately because it's so horrible to book a room, we just want to use our devices. So we're building it into staff as well, and we're looking to put devices into student rooms. So that's kind of where we're going with it. I think it has been transformative, demonstrated by the fact that the university's come back to us and given us some more money to allow us to expand it further. And if I know you're already developing voice and chat interfaces, so it's a great thing to do, but I would really encourage you to innovate. This wouldn't have started if we hadn't have got a device, spent half a day looking at some code on the web and got a developer to build it, our first kind of very simple skill. It's about innovating, it's about trying stuff. If it fails, that's actually good news because you can move on to the next thing.
Chris, thank you very much. When does the pub open? Of course, on Lancaster, it never closes.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
Any questions for Chris, please?
So it was going to save you money, and has it fulfilled that ambition?
It's a great question. I think it has. I think demonstrating that it has saved money is a lot more difficult. I mentioned that the room booking example, so we've just written a business case for investment in the skill which will allow us to do room booking through the device and via chat, and in that business case it talks about the actual pounds that you can save, because the current process on the web takes, if you're a real room booking ninja, you can probably get it done in a minute and a half, assuming the room's free. It's a nightmare. It's probably a couple of minutes on average. With the device, probably 30 seconds or less. So you can apply a cost saving to that. So I think our initial focus was around student experience. A bit hard to demonstrate if it's saved. It probably has. The next phase, you can definitely apply savings, and the university is very keen to realise those savings, I think.
So, just a bit, when you're communicating with Alexa, is there not a GDPR issue? Because students, I can't be certain that it's the actual student themselves asking the question.
Yeah, another great question. There's two things on that. So when the student first signs up to use the skill, if it's their first time, we send them some information. I was talking to a lady about this before, which in plain English describes to them what they're signing up to, how we use the data, and gives them the opportunity to opt out. They can also change the preferences within our mobile phone app if they don't want certain information to be accessible. The other thing we do is if there's particularly sensitive information, It asks you for a PIN code when you're using your voice. So if I ask the speaker device to read out my average grade or information like that, it will say, can I have your PIN number? And that's exactly as you say, because sometimes, you know, if you're in a student room, you don't want someone else being able to access that information. So that's why we built in that protection.
Okay.
If every student in every university, like every teacher in every university has access to a campus digital system, how things have changed in universal access?
Well, I like to think it will give people more time to focus on things that will be more meaningful for a university. So when I talk to lecturing staff, you know, they want to be doing transactional things really quickly and efficiently and as simply as possible, so that they can focus on the student contact time, so that they can focus on doing teaching. And it's the same kind of thing when we're looking at examples of students planning learning, kind of getting welfare support. You want to make that as easy and simple and effective as possible. So I like to think the landscape would change so teachers can do, you know, more teaching and less administrative work and less kind of paperwork and things.
Yeah, how good is it at recognising speech from non-native speakers?
In my practical experience, it's really good. Behind the scenes, when you're asking it a question, it's trying to determine what we call the intent of what you're asking. So I can ask what's next on my timetable, maybe 20 different ways. It has to be able to kind of work that out. You can sometimes run into issues when you're building the skill, trying to deal with the complexities. But in terms of understanding different accents and different dialects and foreign students and things like that, that level is built into this kind of cloud platform, and it's pretty good. I think some of the stats say 80% plus. It varies across some of the different, you know, manufacturers, Google and Amazon. But the actual recognition is getting quite high. And there's a possibility in the future that actually proper multi-language will come in. That's something that we're looking at. So can a native Chinese speaker talk to our skill? There's a few little niggles in there. It's not quite as simple as the marketing might have you believe, but definitely potential there.
So,
The security, what you said, if they put a PIN code in, is that put in on the device, or does the person say it aloud? Because how would that stop someone from hacking into people's...
Yeah, so one good thing at Lancaster is we know 98% of students using the mobile app. The mobile app is on their phone, it's already authenticated, so they can only set the PIN number on their phone device, and they can make preference changes on their phone device. So that's how that's done. That gets round the problem, as you say, of having them to, you know, kind of speak the number into their device.
any other questions for Chris?
At school level, how do you keep the data up to date? So if Greg's changes his opening times, closing times, how do you get around that?
Oh, good question. I could have paid you for that. The design principle was trying not to have Q&A that you have to keep up to date. The Greg's example, we looked around to find if there was a system that said when everything on campus was open. People claimed there was. Upon further investigation, shock, there was no system. So actually we took a week and a half, 2 weeks out of the development schedule. We built a system for our facilities department, a web-based system, and we said, look, if we build you this system and you keep it up to date, we'll do you a deal. Not only will we use it for the voice app, we'll write all of that information back into the campus web pages, so everywhere you see the information is up to date. Is that a deal? And they said, that's a deal. So now we know that we've got a system that's authoritative, and it works for things like outside term times and kind of funny hours. So where possible, the key is to use data that you know is authoritative. There are a few Q&As, because there has to be, but we kind of took a design approach not to have too many of them, for exactly the reason that you say.
Chris, thank you very much indeed.
A pleasure.